The first blow landed before the last box was out of the truck. It came not with a shout, but with the crisp, authoritative rustle of paper. Evan Carter, sweat beading on his forehead, and the ghost of packing tape clinging to his fingers, looked up from the dolly he was wrestling up the driveway. A woman stood at the edge of his new lawn, a vision of suburban order in a beige pantsuit. She held a clipboard like a scepter and a tape measure like a weapon. "Excuse me," she said, the words perfectly enunciated, carrying across the humid October air. "You must be Mr. Carter." Evan straightened, wiping a hand on his jeans. "That's me, Evan. And you are?" "Paula Hargrove. I am the chairperson of the Architectural Control Committee for the Maple Woods Estates Homeowners Association." She did not offer a hand. Instead, her eyes flicked from the moving truck, parked neatly at the curb, to Evan's face, then back to the truck. "I'm afraid we have a few immediate issues to address." Evan glanced at the truck. It wasn't blocking traffic or leaking oil. Issues. "First," Paula began, making a neat checkmark on her sheet, "your moving vehicle is parked within a designated fire lane." She pointed to the street. All roadways within Maple Woods are designated fire lanes, per the community rules and regulations. Section 4.3. All personal and commercial vehicles must be parked entirely within the owner's driveway during daytime hours. Evan looked at the wide, empty street, then at his own driveway, currently occupied by his sedan. "It's a moving truck. It's here for a few hours. Where else am I supposed to put it?" Paula's smile was thin and without warmth. "That is a logistical issue for the homeowner to resolve prior to the move. The rules are in place to ensure emergency vehicle access at all times. I can provide you with a copy of the fee schedule for violations." Before Evan could process the polite absurdity of the situation, Paula's gaze shifted to the backyard, where a brightly colored plastic slide lay on the grass. Evan had set it up first thing, a small beacon of familiarity for his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, who was watching the chaos from the kitchen window. "Second," Paula continued, her pen already moving, "that structure." She gestured toward the slide. "All playsets, temporary or permanent, require prior written approval from the ACC to ensure they comply with our community's aesthetic standards and safety guidelines. Please see CC&R Article 7, Section 2. You'll need to submit an application with material specifications and a site plan. The review process typically takes 30 days. Evan felt a surge of disbelief, hot and sharp. He had been in the house for less than 2 hours. "It's a plastic slide for my daughter. It's not a permanent structure." "The governing documents make no distinction," Paula said, her tone unchanged. "An unapproved structure is an unapproved structure. I can issue a courtesy notice for now, but if it is not removed by the end of the day, a formal violation process will be initiated." She extended the clipboard. "If you'll just sign here to acknowledge receipt of this verbal warning." The world seemed to shrink to the space between them, the sun beating down. The smell of fresh-cut grass from a neighboring yard. The sheer, unyielding confidence radiating from this woman. He saw Lily's small face in the window, her expression anxious. This house, this yard, was supposed to be their sanctuary, a quiet place to heal after the noise and chaos of the past year. Evan took a slow breath, forcing the frustration down. He was an architect. He understood rules, structure, the importance of a solid foundation. But this was different. This was the weaponization of order. "Ms. Hargrove," he said, his voice level and calm. "I appreciate you taking the time to welcome me to the neighborhood. I'll review the documents as soon as I'm able. For now, my priority is getting my daughter settled. The truck will be gone by 5. And the slide is not a permanent fixture." I'm sure we can resolve this like reasonable neighbors." Paula's eyes narrowed slightly. She seemed momentarily thrown by his lack of immediate capitulation or anger. She withdrew the clipboard. "The rules, Mr. Carter, are not suggestions. They are the framework that protects the property values and quality of life for everyone in this community. A framework you agreed to when you purchased your home. I trust you will make the correct choices." She turned, her movements precise, and walked away, leaving Evan standing in his own driveway, the half-empty moving truck a monument to his disrupted new beginning. He looked back at the kitchen window. Lily was gone. The confrontation, public and procedural, had already cast a shadow over their sanctuary. He had a sinking feeling that this was not a welcome, but a declaration of war. The first week was a study in forced tranquility. Evan unpacked boxes, arranged furniture, and transformed the sterile emptiness of the house into a home. He set up his office in the spare bedroom overlooking the backyard, the large window framing the oak tree that had sold him on the property. It was under that tree that Lily was meant to reclaim her childhood, a space free from the hushed corridors of hospitals and the well-meaning but suffocating sympathy of friends. Lily, however, remained hesitant. The plastic slide sat, folded and forlorn, in the garage. She preferred to stay indoors, drawing at the kitchen table, her back to the sprawling green yard. The image of Paula Hargrove, with her clipboard and unyielding posture, seemed to have imprinted on her as much as it had on him. She was a mean lady, Daddy. Lily had said that first night, a simple, damning verdict. She just likes rules. Sweetie, Evan had replied, the words feeling hollow even to him. Some people think rules are the most important thing. His brother, Mark, a corporate lawyer 3 states away, had been less diplomatic. An ACC chair with a tape measure on day 1. That's a 5-alarm Karen fire. Evan, Mark had said over the phone, his voice a welcome dose of pragmatic humor. You've got a procedural bully on your hands. She lives for this stuff. Whatever you do, don't get emotional. Get organized. Document everything, every conversation, every letter. Create a paper trail that would choke a horse. Following Mark's advice, Evan spent his first evening not arranging books, but reading. He sat at his new dining room table with the thick 3-ring binder Paula had mentioned, the welcome packet, which a courier had delivered the next day. It was a dense tome of covenants, conditions and restrictions, CC&Rs, bylaws, and community rules. He read methodically, as if studying a set of blueprints, a yellow highlighter in his hand. He saw the rules Paula had cited, the fire lane parking, the unapproved structures, but he also saw the framework of the organization, the procedures for violations, the rights of homeowners. He was an architect. He knew that to understand a structure, you had to understand its foundation. On Thursday, the weekly Maple Woods Estates e-newsletter arrived in his inbox. Tucked between an announcement for the fall bake sale and a reminder about lawn fertilization schedules was a small, unsigned item under the heading, A Welcoming Word. A community's strength is measured by its shared commitment to established standards. New residents are reminded that adherence to the governing documents is not optional, but a foundational requirement of living in our beautiful neighborhood. Upholding these standards protects the investment we have all made. We look forward to our newest neighbors embracing this shared responsibility with enthusiasm. It was a masterclass in polite aggression. Evan read it twice. The passive voice and veiled reference landing with the precision of a targeted strike. Paula wasn't just enforcing rules. She was shaping a narrative, positioning him as a threat to the collective good before he'd even met most of his neighbors. He pushed back from the table and walked to the window overlooking the backyard. The yard, was his primary reason for choosing this specific lot. It was larger than most, bordered on the back by a thicket of trees and a weathered, 6-foot wooden fence that offered privacy. It felt like a world apart. He'd envisioned a tire swing hanging from the big oak, a small garden for Lily, a patio where they could have quiet dinners on summer evenings, a sanctuary. His highlighter had paused on one particular clause in the CC&Rs, a section that seemed unusually specific. CC&R, Paragraph 8.4.2, View Corridor Easements. He'd read it 3 times. The clause prohibited any fence, structure, or landscaping feature exceeding 4 feet in height within designated view corridor easements, which were established to protect scenic views of the community's greenbelt areas. This seems unusually specific, he'd muttered to himself. I should check where this easement is. He looked out at his back fence. It was well over 4 feet tall. It had been there when he bought the house, a fact noted on the seller's disclosure. If it violated a rule, surely it would have been flagged during the sale. Unless the rule was new, or its enforcement was. He made a note to get a copy of the community's official plat map. A blueprint, he thought, was the only way to fight a war over structure. He was beginning to understand. Paula's power wasn't in her personality or her position. It was in the documents. It was in the selective interpretation and aggressive application of clauses, like Paragraph 8.4.2. And Evan knew, with the quiet certainty of a man who builds things for a living, that the only way to beat a flawed design is with a better set of plans. The letter arrived on day 7. It wasn't left in the mailbox or tucked in the door. It was delivered by a certified mail carrier who required a signature, a procedural formality designed to communicate gravity and eliminate any claim of ignorance. The green certified mail receipt was a flag of bureaucratic warfare planted on his doorstep. Inside the crisp, business-sized envelope from Myers Management, the firm that managed Maplewoods Estates, was a single, immaculately formatted page. Formal notice of violation. It was addressed to him by name, citing his property address and a reference number that looked chillingly official. The body of the letter was cold, precise, and devoid of any neighborly warmth. Dear Mr. Carter, this letter serves as formal notice that your property at 128 Blossom Lane is in violation of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions CC&Rs of the Maplewoods Estates Homeowners Association. The specific violation pertains to CC&R Article 8, Section 8.4.2, View Corridor Easements. An inspection conducted on October 7th has confirmed the existence of a non-compliant structure on your property. The solid wood fence located along the rear property line exceeds the maximum permissible height of 4 feet within a designated view corridor easement. As per the association's enforcement policy, you are hereby granted a cure period of 14 days from the date of this notice to bring the property into compliance. Compliance can be achieved by the complete removal of the non-compliant section of the fence. Failure to cure the violation within the specified time frame will result in the imposition of monetary penalties. Fines will be levied at a rate of $50 50 BE per day until the violation is resolved. Please be advised that continued non-compliance may lead to further enforcement actions, including the placement of a lien on your property. A photograph of the violation is enclosed for your reference. The attached photo, a glossy 4x6 print, showed his back fence from an angle that suggested the photographer had been standing in the common area behind his property. The fence looked sturdy, private, and utterly harmless. Evan read the letter 3 times. His hands were steady, his pulse even. Mark's advice echoed in his mind. Don't get emotional. Get organized. This wasn't a neighborhood squabble anymore. This was a formal, Documented legal threat. The mention of a lien was the HOA equivalent of a nuclear option, a legal claim against his home that could, in a worst-case scenario, lead to foreclosure, and it was all over a fence that had been standing for years. He placed the letter, the envelope, and the certified mail receipt into a new manila folder. He labeled it, in neat block letters, HOA, fence violation. This was the beginning of his paper trail. He knew what he had to do. His first instinct was to fight fire with fire, to draft a scathing legal response. But he was an architect, not a litigator. His strength was in analysis, not confrontation. He would start by trying to resolve this calmly, professionally, and through the proper channels. He picked up the phone and dialed the number for Myers Management, listed at the bottom of the letter, after navigating a brief automated menu. A polite but distant voice answered. Myers Management. This is Brenda. How may I direct your call? Hello, Brenda. My name is Evan Carter. I'm a resident at Maplewoods Estates, and I'm calling about a violation notice I just received. He provided the reference number. There was a pause filled with the soft clicking of a keyboard. Yes. Mr. Carter, I have the file here. Violation of CCNR 8.4.2, the rear fence. That's the one, Evan said, keeping his tone even. The fence was here when I purchased the house. It's on the seller's disclosure and was never flagged during the closing process. I believe there may be a misunderstanding about the property line or the easement location. Brenda's reply was smooth and practiced. The verbal equivalent of a brick wall. I understand, sir. However, all enforcement matters for the Architectural Control Committee are handled directly by the committee chairperson. We, at Myers Management, only administer the notices and process the payments. Any discussion regarding the substance of the violation would need to be with Ms. Paula Hargrove. Of course, it would. The system was designed as a perfect loop, directing all inquiries back to the single point of authority. Can you provide me with a contact number for Ms. Hargrove? I'm sorry, sir. We are not authorized to give out the personal contact information of board members. You can submit a written inquiry through the homeowner portal, and it will be forwarded to the committee for their review at the next scheduled meeting. The next meeting, according to the calendar in the welcome binder, was in 3 weeks, well after his 14-day cure period expired. It was a bureaucratic checkmate. Evan hung up, the polite futility of the call settling in his stomach like cold coffee. A formal, written inquiry was pointless. He needed to talk to a person. He needed to de-escalate this before it spiraled. There was only one option left. He would have to attempt a neighborly conversation, face to face. He found Paula Hargrove's address in the community directory. She lived 2 streets over, in a house identical to his own model, but with a garden that was a masterpiece of controlled beauty. Roses were pruned to perfect spheres, hedges sculpted into sharp geometric lines, and not a single weed dared to show its face in the mulch. It was beautiful, but it was also sterile, a landscape under martial law. Paula answered the door, wearing a crisp gardening apron over a silk blouse. She was holding a pair of small, menacingly sharp clippers. Mr. Carter, she said, her eyebrows raising in polite surprise. There was no welcome in her voice. Paula. Good afternoon, Evan began, offering a small, conciliatory smile. I'm sorry to bother you at home. I tried calling the management company about the notice, and they directed me to you. I was hoping we could talk for just a few minutes about the fence. Paula set the clippers down on a small table by the door. Her posture stiffened. Mr. Carter, as I'm sure the management company informed you, all official association business must be conducted through proper channels. It is inappropriate to discuss a formal violation notice outside of a scheduled hearing or a written submission to the board. This is to protect both the homeowner and the association from any claims of improper influence. She was building a fortress of procedure around herself, and it was impenetrable. "I'm not trying to exert improper influence," Evan said, his patience beginning to fray. "I'm trying to understand the issue. The fence is not new. If it's a violation, why is it only being addressed now? And I have questions about whether my property is even subject to that specific easement." Paula picked up her clippers again, the metallic snick as she opened and closed them, punctuating the silence. The association conducts periodic reviews of the community to ensure ongoing compliance. The fact that a violation has been overlooked in the past does not preclude its enforcement now. As for your questions about the easement, you are welcome to submit them in writing for the board's consideration. Her tone was polite, cold, and utterly unassailable. She was a master of her craft. She had created a system where she was the accuser, judge, and jury, and the only appeal process was to submit a letter to a committee she controlled. "So, you won't even discuss it with me?" Evan asked, the last of his hope for a reasonable conversation dying. "It would be procedurally improper," she said, her eyes flicking past him to a rosebush that had a single, slightly wilted leaf. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some pruning to attend to. Good day, Mr. Carter." She closed the door, not with a slam, but with a soft, decisive click that echoed the finality of their conversation. Evan stood on her perfectly swept porch for a long moment, the scent of roses hanging in the air. He looked at her immaculate garden, a space where every single leaf was in its correct place, and he understood her motivation a little better. This wasn't about a fence. It was about control. It was about a world she could bend to her will, one rule at a time. He walked home, his mind racing. The path of calm. Neighborly resolution was closed. The path of bureaucratic appeal was a dead end. That left only one path forward, the one Mark had advised from the beginning. He would have to get organized. He would have to build a case. He would have to find the blueprints and prove, with indisputable facts, that her entire structure was built on a flawed foundation. The investigation began not with a confrontation, but with a check for $50. It was the fee Myers Management charged for a complete set of the association's governing documents, including the official community plat map on file. Evan wrote the check, placed it in an envelope with a formal request letter, and sent it via certified mail, a paper trail for every action. While he waited, he decided to do some groundwork. He remembered a neighbor he'd met briefly while moving in, an older man named George who had been walking his beagle. George had a no-nonsense air about him and had lived in the neighborhood since it was built. He found George out in his yard, meticulously oiling a rusty wheelbarrow. "Morning," Evan said, approaching the fence between their properties. George looked up, squinting. "You're the new fella. Carter. Right, the architect." He wiped his oily hands on a rag. "Surprised they haven't run you out of town on a rail yet." Evan chuckled. "They're working on it. I got a violation notice about my back fence." George stopped his work and leaned against the wheelbarrow, a knowing look on his face. "Let me guess. Paula Hargrove. View corridor easement. CC&R 8.4.2. Evan was stunned. "How did you know?" "Because I was on the board 10 years ago, back when they drew up that rule," George said, his voice a low grumble. "I quit in disgust over procedural irregularities. That's what I called it in my resignation letter. What I meant was, Paula was twisting the rules to suit her pet projects even back then." "This was a gold mine. Pet projects? What do you mean?" "She gets an idea in her head about how the neighborhood ought to look, And then she goes digging through the CC&Rs to find a clause she can use to make it happen. That view corridor business was all about getting a clear line of sight from the clubhouse patio to the new fountain they were putting in over on the greenbelt. A few of us argued the easement language was vague, but she pushed it through. George gestured toward Evan's backyard. The original developer plans for this phase of homes were tricky. Some of these lots on the edge, like yours and mine, were technically plotted before the HOA was even finalized. The lines get blurry. Paula loves blurry lines. Gives her room to maneuver. So, what do I do? Evan asked. George picked up his oil can. Don't trust the map they give you. The one from the management company is a clean, modern copy. You need the original, the one filed with the county. Go down to the county recorder's office. Get the official, stamped plat map for this subdivision. Get the deed for your specific lot. Those are the documents that hold up in court, not some PDF from Myers Management. He gave Evan a pointed look. And while you're there, request copies of the HOA's meeting, minutes for the last 2 years. If she's been planning something, there might be a breadcrumb in there. The trip to the county recorder's office felt like stepping into a different world. The building was old, smelling of dust and aging paper. Here, authority wasn't in a 3-ring binder. It was in heavy, leather-bound plat books and microfilm records. Evan requested the official plat map for the Maple Woods Estates subdivision, Section 3, and the deed for Lot 47, his property. A clerk, a woman with kind eyes and an encyclopedic knowledge of the filing system, returned 20 minutes later with the documents. The plat map was a large, creased document, a beautiful piece of draftsmanship with a surveyor's official stamp in the corner. Evan unrolled it carefully on a large wooden table. He found his lot, tracing its boundaries with his finger. And then he saw it. The map clearly delineated the common areas, the private lots, and any easements. He found the line marking the view corridor easement established by the HOA. It ran along the back of several properties, a thick, dashed line, but when it reached the property adjacent to his, it stopped. The easement ended precisely at his property line. His lot was not encumbered. He stared at the map, his heart starting to beat faster. It was unambiguous. The official, legally binding document filed with the county proved his fence was not in violation because the rule did not apply to his property. He then pulled out the HOA-provided plat map that had arrived in the mail that morning. It was a clean, digitized version, and on this version, the dashed line for the easement continued, neatly and cleanly, across the back of his property. It was a small difference, a few pixels on a screen, a 1/4 inch of ink on paper, but it was the difference between compliance and a lien on his home. The HOA's map was either a shockingly incompetent error or an intentional fabrication. Remembering George's advice, Evan went back to the clerk. I'd also like to request public records from a homeowners association. Is that possible? If they've filed them with us. Yes, she said. What are you looking for? Meeting minutes. Maple Woods Estates, HOA. The last 2 years. This request took longer. The records were digital. Finally, the clerk handed him a flash drive. They file their minutes quarterly, as required. It should all be on there. Back in his car, Evan plugged the flash drive into his laptop. He opened the files. A series of PDFs, one for each board meeting. He started scrolling through, looking for any mention of view corridors, boundaries, or easements. He found it in the minutes from a meeting dated 18 months ago. The agenda item was review of common area boundaries and easement definitions. He read the paragraph summarizing the discussion. It described a motion made by Paula Hargrove, to clarify and reaffirm the boundaries of the view corridor easement as depicted on the official community map. The motion passed unanimously. But the next paragraph, which should have contained the details of the discussion, was gone. In its place was a solid black bar, a digital redaction. Beneath it, in italics, was a single sentence per legal counsel. Certain executive session deliberations have been redacted to protect attorney-client privilege. Evan leaned back in his seat, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. The discrepancy on the map wasn't an accident. They had discussed it. They had voted on it. And then, they had hidden the discussion behind a veil of legal privilege. They knew the official county map didn't support their claim, so they had voted to adopt their own version and then buried the evidence. This wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. It was a conspiracy, documented in their own records. He now had the official plat map, a counterfeit map from the HOA, and redacted meeting minutes. He drove home, no longer just a homeowner defending his fence, but an investigator who had uncovered a foundation of deceit. The paper trail wasn't just for defense anymore. It was for a counteroffensive. Armed with a folder that now felt heavy with the weight of evidence, Evan shifted his strategy from defense to a controlled, methodical offense. He spent an evening drafting a formal response, not as a desperate homeowner, but as an architect presenting an irrefutable structural analysis. He laid it out with cool precision. He cited the violation notice. He stated his position that the fence was not in violation. He attached, as Exhibit A, a certified copy of the official county plat map, with his property and the termination of the easement highlighted. He attached, as Exhibit B, the HOA's own map, highlighting the discrepancy. He concluded by respectfully requesting that the violation notice be rescinded immediately. He made no mention of the redacted minutes. That was an ace he would keep up his sleeve. He sent the letter via certified mail to the HOA Board of Directors, care of Myers Management. The green receipt, when it came back, felt like a volley fired in a silent war. The response came a week later. It was not a letter rescinding the violation. It was another formal envelope containing a notice of hearing. Dear Mr. Carter, the Board of Directors has received your correspondence regarding the violation at 128 Blossom Lane, in accordance with the association's bylaws. A formal hearing has been scheduled to allow you the opportunity to be heard on this matter. The hearing will take place on Tuesday, November 5th, at 7:00 p.m. in the Maple Woods Clubhouse. You will be allotted 5 minutes to present your case to the board. Please bring any documentation you wish to be considered. Please be advised that should the board vote to uphold the violation, the daily fines of 50 Zorzlers will be applied retroactively from the end of the original cure period. Failure to resolve the matter may result in the association's attorney placing a lien on your property to secure the debt. It was a declaration of escalation. They had received his proof and ignored it. They were forcing a public confrontation, a show trial where they controlled the clock and the proceedings. The threat of a lien was now explicit, a tool of intimidation designed to make him fold. But Paula wasn't content with merely procedural pressure. She began a subtle, insidious smear campaign. The first sign was at the neighborhood fall potluck, held on the clubhouse lawn. Evan took Lily, hoping a casual, friendly event would help ease her anxieties about their new community. At first, it seemed to be working. Lily cautiously joined a group of kids in a game of tag. Her laughter, a sound Evan hadn't heard enough lately. Then he overheard it. He was standing near the dessert table when he heard Paula's voice from a group of homeowners nearby. Her tone was one of grave, feigned concern. "It's such a shame," she was saying. When one person decides the rules don't apply to them, it affects everyone. Our insurance provider has already indicated that unresolved compliance issues, especially concerning easements, could lead to a premium increase for the entire community. A woman in the group gasped. Our insurance could go up because of his fence. It's a liability issue, Paula said, shaking her head sadly. And of course, there's the impact on property values. Buyers look for stable, uniform communities. A visible, long-standing violation signals that the neighborhood standards are eroding. It's the first step in a downward slide. It was brilliant in its cruelty. She was turning his private dispute into a public threat, painting him as a financial menace to his neighbors. The pressure was no longer just legal. It was social. He felt a tap on his arm. It was George, the retired surveyor, holding a plate with a slice of apple pie. "Don't let her get to you, kid," George said, nodding toward Paula's group. "She's rattling the cage, trying to spook the herd. It's an old trick." "People are listening to her," Evan said, his jaw tight. "Some will. The nervous ones," George acknowledged. "But you stick to your facts. Facts are stubborn things. Her whole case is built on a lie. You just have to pull the right thread, and it will all unravel." The pressure mounted over the next week. Neighbors who had been friendly now offered clipped, polite nods. He saw them glancing at his back fence as they walked their dogs. The social temperature had dropped. The worst part was the effect on Lily. She stopped asking to go to the park. She grew quiet, sensing the tension in the air, the way children always do. One afternoon, she came in from the backyard, where she had been trying to build a fairy house at the base of the oak tree. "Daddy," she said, her lower lip trembling. "The lady from the other day was back. She was taking pictures of our fence again." Evan's blood ran cold. He went to the window. Paula was standing on the common area greenbelt behind his house, her phone held up, methodically taking photographs. It felt like a violation, a deliberate intrusion into their sanctuary. That was the moment his resolve hardened from a professional necessity into a father's protective instinct. This was no longer about a fence or a flawed map. It was about defending his home, his daughter's peace of mind. Paula had made this personal. She had brought the conflict into his sanctuary. And now, he would meet her on her own ground, the formal, procedural battlefield of the HOA hearing, and he would dismantle her case, piece by painstaking piece. He gathered his files, his certified maps, his redacted minutes. He was ready for the hearing. The Maple Woods Clubhouse meeting room was designed to be welcoming, with its soft lighting, comfortable chairs, and generic landscape paintings. Tonight, it felt like a courtroom. The 5 members of the board of directors sat at a long table at the front, facing the dozen or so residents who had come to watch the proceedings. Paula, in her capacity as ACC chair, sat not with the board, but at a small, separate table to the side, her binder and a stack of photographs arranged before her like munitions. Evan sat in the front row, his own slim file resting on his lap. Beside him, George gave a reassuring nod. On the main table, directly in front of the board president, sat a small, black digital countdown timer. It currently read 05:00. The board president, a man named Bill, called the meeting to order and moved quickly through the agenda. Next item, the violation hearing for 128 Blossom Lane. Ms. Hargrove, you may present the ACC's case. Paula rose and walked to a small lectern. She was the picture of composure and professionalism. "Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board, fellow residents. The issue before us is a simple matter of compliance. The property at 128 Blossom Lane has a fence that is in clear violation of CC&R Article 8, Section 8.4.2, which prohibits structures over 4 feet in height within the community's designated view corridor easement. She placed a large, glossy map on an easel. It was the HOA's digitized map, the one Evan knew to be inaccurate. As you can see from the official community plat map, the easement runs along the entire rear of the properties on Blossom Lane, including Lot 47. She then held up a series of photographs. These photos, taken last week, document the non-compliant fence, which is a solid wood structure measuring 6 feet in height. This violation not only obstructs the scenic view of the Greenbelt, a key community amenity, but also sets a dangerous precedent. If we allow one violation to stand, we weaken the foundation of the rules that protect all of our property values. Her presentation was crisp, confident, and persuasive. To anyone who didn't know the full story, her case seemed open and shut. She concluded, the ACC recommends the board uphold the violation and instruct the homeowner to comply within 7 days, after which fines will be levied as previously noticed. Thank you. She sat down, looking satisfied. Bill, the president, looked at Evan. Mr. Carter, you now have 5 minutes to present your case. The clerk will start the timer when you begin. Evan walked to the lectern, placed his folder on its surface, and took a deep breath. He looked at the board, at the timer, and then at the assembled residents. Good evening, he began, his voice calm and steady. The timer started its silent, relentless countdown. 04, 59, 04, 58. My name is Evan Carter. I am an architect. My work involves understanding rules, blueprints, and the structures they represent. I have approached this issue not as a disgruntled homeowner, but as an architect examining a flawed design. He opened his folder. First, let's look at the rule itself. He placed a copy of the CC&R's page on the room's document projector. The text of FAR 8.4.2 filled the screen behind him. The rule prohibits a fence within a designated easement. The keyword here is within. The rule is only relevant if my property is subject to the easement. 0425. Ms. Hargrove presented what she called the official community plat map. He looked at the map on her easel. However, that is not the legally binding document. This is... He removed the HOA's map from the easel and replaced it with his own large printout of the certified county plat map. He used a laser pointer to trace the boundaries. This is the official plat map for Maple Woods Estates. Section 3. Certified by the county recorder. As you can all clearly see, the view corridor easement. This dashed line here terminates at the edge of Lot 46. It does not cross onto my property. Lot 47. Therefore, my fence is not, and cannot be, in violation of Section 8.4.2. A murmur went through the room. Board members leaned forward, squinting at the map. Paula sat bolt upright, her knuckles white where she gripped her binder. 0310. The discrepancy between the two maps is not a clerical error. Evan continued, his voice hardening slightly. I submitted this evidence to the board over 2 weeks ago. The decision to proceed with this hearing suggests the board was either unaware of this official document or chose to ignore it in favor of its own, inaccurate version. He then projected a copy of the redacted meeting minutes. This leads to my final point. These are the board's own meeting minutes from 18 months ago. The agenda item is a review of this exact easement. The board voted to clarify and reaffirm the boundaries based on its own map. But the record of the discussion that led to that vote has been deliberately blacked out, hidden behind a claim of attorney-client privilege. 0155. He turned from the projector to face the board directly. I am not a lawyer, but I ask you to consider what legitimate legal advice would require a board to hide a discussion about adopting a map that contradicts the official county records. What was said in that executive session that the board felt necessary to hide from its own members? He had them. He could see it in their faces. The treasurer, a younger woman named Sarah, looked pale. Bill, the president, was avoiding his gaze. 045. This violation is not about offense, Evan concluded, his voice ringing with quiet authority. It's about a pattern of behavior. It's about using inaccurate documents and procedural intimidation to enforce rules where they do not apply. I have proven, with certified public records, that no violation exists. I respectfully request that the board not only dismiss this violation with prejudice, but also ask itself why this was allowed to happen. He walked back to his seat. The timer on the table read Giorgio 07. He had not shouted. He had not accused. He had simply presented a series of documented, verifiable facts that dismantled Paula's entire case. The room was silent. The silence in the clubhouse stretched, thick and uncomfortable. The 5 board members looked from Evan's certified map to Paula's now flimsy-looking version, then at each other. Paula Hargrove sat frozen, her face a mask of disbelief. The polite, orderly world she had constructed was collapsing around her in real time. It was Sarah, the treasurer, who finally broke the silence. She cleared her throat, her voice nervous but clear. Mr. President, I have a question. When we reviewed Mr. Carter's submission in preparation for this hearing, were we shown the certified county map? Bill, the president, shifted in his seat. He looked at Paula. Paula, you were responsible for compiling the documentation for the board packet. What map was included? Paula finally found her voice, though it was strained. The official community map was included, the one we have used for all ACC matters. But not the county map Sarah pressed, the one Mr. Carter just presented, the one that is the actual legal record. The board voted to adopt the community map as the official reference for enforcement, Paula said. Falling back on procedure, that is the document of record for association business. A document that appears to be fabricated, Sarah shot back, her confidence growing. She turned to the rest of the board. I think Mr. Carter has raised more than just a question about his fence. He's raised a serious question about the integrity of our records and our procedures. We were given incomplete and misleading information for this hearing. She took a deep breath. Mr. President, I move to dismiss the violation against 128 Blossom Lane with prejudice. Second, another board member said immediately. All in favor, Bill asked. His voice resigned. 4 hands went up. Bill reluctantly added his own. The motion passes. The violation is dismissed. A small wave of applause rippled through the residents in the audience. George clapped Evan on the shoulder. But Sarah wasn't finished. Furthermore, she said, her voice gaining strength, I believe Mr. Carter's evidence of a discrepancy in our official maps, combined with the redacted minutes, warrants further action. We have a fiduciary duty to our members to act in good faith and with accurate information. I move that the board commission an immediate, independent audit of all ACC records, maps, and meeting minutes for the past 3 years, to be conducted by an outside legal firm. Second, the same board member called out. This time, Paula stood up. That is an unnecessary and costly action. There is no evidence of wrongdoing, only a minor cartographical discrepancy. Sit down, Paula, Bill said, his voice flat. He looked tired. We'll vote on the motion. The motion to launch an audit passed, 3-2. Paula sank back into her chair, publicly defeated. Her authority, built on a foundation of meticulously curated paper, had been demolished by a single, unalterable fact from the public record. In a final, humiliating move. Bill looked at her. Paula, given the evidence presented tonight, the board is officially censuring you for overreach and for providing the board with incomplete information. The ACC's enforcement activities are suspended pending the outcome of the audit. The meeting was adjourned. As people filed out, several neighbors stopped to shake Evan's hand. He had not only won his case, he had exposed a systemic flaw, forcing the organization to police itself. Paula remained at her table, staring at her useless binder, a general surveying a lost battlefield. Weeks turned into a month. The audit ground on, and a quiet calm settled over Maple Woods Estates. Evan finally installed the tire swing on the big oak tree, and Lily's laughter began to fill the backyard sanctuary. The letter from the board officially rescinding the fine and closing the violation case was a formality, but a satisfying one. Evan placed it at the very top of his file before storing it away. The results of the independent audit were presented at the next community-wide meeting. The room was packed. The auditor, a no-nonsense lawyer in a gray suit, delivered the findings with brisk efficiency. The discrepancy in the plat maps was confirmed. The redaction of the minutes was deemed inappropriate and lacking sufficient legal justification. But the biggest revelation was the motive. The audit had uncovered a string of emails between Paula Hargrove and a company called Evergreen Landscaping. Paula had been systematically using the view corridor easement violation to force homeowners to remove fences and mature landscaping. Evergreen Landscaping would then be awarded a no-bid contract from the HOA to restore the common area view, a project for which they consistently overcharged. A forensic accounting of Paula's finances revealed a series of regular payments from the owner of Evergreen kickbacks for steering lucrative contracts his way. Her obsession hadn't been about order, it had been about profit. The community was stunned. Paula, who was not present, was formally removed from the ACC and barred from ever serving on the board again. The board also announced it was pursuing legal action to recover the misappropriated funds. As the meeting moved to new business, Evan stood up. He had one last piece of work to do. "My name is Evan Carter," he said, addressing the new board president. "The events of the past few months have revealed a serious transparency issue in our association. To prevent this from ever happening again, I would like to propose a new bylaw." He laid out his proposal that upon the closing of any home sale in the community, the HOA be required to provide the new homeowner not with a welcome packet, but with a simple, one-page document containing a certified copy of the official county plat map for their lot and a plain language summary of any easements or use restrictions specific to their property. "Knowledge is the best defense against abuse of power," he concluded. "Let's empower every homeowner from day one." The motion was met with a round of applause. It passed unanimously. Evan had not sought revenge. He had pushed for constructive reform, turning his personal battle into a permanent protection for the entire community. But there was one final, loose thread. During his own meticulous review of his property survey, Evan had made a private discovery. The old fence, the one that started it all, was not perfectly on his property line. A 40-foot section of it was, in fact, 6 inches over the line, encroaching slightly on the yard of his quiet, elderly neighbor to the south, Mrs. Peterson. It was a minor, almost unnoticeable encroachment, but it was there. He had won his war on a principle of legal accuracy, and his own property was not perfectly in line. After the meeting, he found Mrs. Peterson by the coffee station. "Mrs. Peterson," he began, "I wanted to talk to you about our shared fence line." He explained his discovery. She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, Heavens. Dear. That old thing. My husband and the previous owner put that up 20 years ago. 6 inches. Who cares about 6 inches? I do, Evan said. My whole argument with the board was about respecting property lines and doing things the right way. It wouldn't be right for me to ignore my own. He smiled. So, as a gesture of goodwill to the community, and especially to you, my first real friend here, I've hired a crew to come next week. They're going to move that section of fence and place it a full foot inside my property line. At my expense, of course. Mrs. Peterson looked at him, her eyes welling up slightly. Evan, she said, placing a hand on his arm, you are a good man and a very good neighbor. Standing there, Evan felt a sense of peace that had nothing to do with winning a fight. He had defended his sanctuary, exposed a corrupt system, and strengthened his community. He had restored order not through the rigid application of rules, but through fairness, transparency, and a simple act of neighborly kindness. His daughter was laughing on her tire swing. The community was healing, and his own new beginning finally felt secure. Built on a foundation of integrity, he had laid himself